Ukraine is striking with air defense systems against Russia. Explosions at the Pogonovo training ground in the Voronezh region. Moscow is under mass drone attacks. Vnukovo and Sheremetyevo airports are closed. Ukraine's air defense is getting stronger. The first Skyranger 35 anti-aircraft system will arrive as early as next week. The US has approved the sale of Patriot systems, and Spain is providing 100 million euros for the purchase of American weapons for Ukraine. Sniper scopes continue to be imported into Russia. Swarovski from neutral Austria. Peace is coming soon. An American delegation is already in Kyiv to resume negotiations between Ukraine and Russia. A scandal in the Kremlin. Military leader Gerasimov got his mistress a job at the Ministry of Defense and bought her several luxury apartments. We'll talk about all this in just a few seconds, but right now, please like this video and subscribe to the Ukraine Today channel so you don't get lost on YouTube. Well then, let's get started. Ukraine's defense forces struck the Pogonovo military training ground in Russia's Voronezh region. OSINT analysts from Cyber report that this is the first strike deep inside Russia with American weapons under Trump.
There were several targets. One of them was the Pogonovo training ground where a concentration of personnel was located. It was from this location that the first large-scale concentration of troops began, which later turned into the invasion on February 24, 2022.
The Ukrainian General Staff also confirmed the ATACMS strike themselves.
The armed forces of Ukraine successfully used ATACMS tactical missile systems to deliver a precision strike on military targets inside Russia. This is a landmark event that underscores Ukraine's unwavering commitment to its sovereignty.
At the same time, Russia's Ministry of Defense also confirmed the strike. They say the attack itself took place on November 18th. According to
the city of Voronezh, the adversary used 4 ATACMS operational tactical missiles manufactured in the USA. During the ensuing missile defense battle, Russian combat crews operating the S-400 air defense system and the Pantsir missile gun system shot down all the ATACMS missiles. And
again, OSINT analysts are reporting that the Russians did indeed shoot down some of the missiles. However, there were also hits.
There are different versions about where they hit, but we'll see from the satellite images if the clouds allow. It's also true that some of the missiles were shot down.
Also, between 11:30 p.m. and 1 o'clock a.m., the Ilyinsky oil refinery was under attack. Look, the police, right at the refinery. There. They didn't shoot it down. There was a flash over there. The refinery in the Putin region was also under attack. In particular, it was reported that air defense systems were active over the city.
I was just about to go to sleep, and now the siren's going off. Is that normal? No. Damn it! Can't even get a decent night's sleep. It's really getting on their nerves. I'm tense. All this needs to be shut down. It's infuriating.
Air defense activity was also recorded in the Voronezh, Bryansk, and Belgorod regions. The night leading up to November 19th was also restless in the Ryazan region. A strike was carried out on the Ryazan thermal power plant in Novobichurinsk. This is one of the largest power plants in Russia. Moscow Mayor Sobyanin also reported a drone attack.
A drone attack heading toward Moscow was repelled. Emergency service specialists are working at the site where the debris fell.
The Russian Ministry of Defense, you won't believe it, claimed that they shot everything down and, as usual, did not report any hits. In short, everything is steadily going according to plan. In Russia, they shoot everything down so well, they spot all the drones so perfectly, that as a result, people are being offered this kind of technological marvel. A video featuring a unique anti-drone device, which was developed by the military either in China or Korea, is now going viral on the Russian internet.
Take a look at this strange device. According to its developers, it protects against kamikaze drones and unmanned aerial vehicles that drop grenades. On the outside, there's a lightweight frame covered with a dense netting that surrounds the person from all sides. The principle is simple. If a drone flies directly at you, its propellers instantly get tangled in the net, and if a grenade falls from above, the net prevents the fuse from activating. The soldiers claim that with this gear, you can move freely and it hardly gets in the way during combat.
So you can move freely, and it doesn't get in the way during battle. I can already picture Russian boys running from mortars with this thing on. The State Department has approved a possible sale to Ukraine of equipment to support the Patriot air defense system for $105 million. This was reported by the Defense Security Cooperation Agency of the U.S. Department of Defense.
The State Department has decided to approve a possible sale to the government of Ukraine of aviation munitions and related equipment worth about $825 million. The Defense Security Cooperation Agency has provided the necessary certification, notifying Congress. At the same time,
Spain is preparing a new military aid package for Ukraine worth 615 million euros. This was announced by Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez following a meeting with Zelensky. Within a month,
Spain will provide a new package of military aid to Ukraine worth 615 million euros.
it is known that 100 million euros from this aid package will go to the Pearl program. This is a NATO initiative in which alliance member countries pool funds to purchase American weapons and ammunition for Ukraine. So 250 million will be allocated for products for anti-drone systems and radars. Spain will also provide Ukraine with 40 missiles for the Iris-T air defense system. At the same time, Rheinmetall CEO Armin Paperger announced that as early as next week, the first Skyranger 35 self-propelled anti-aircraft system will arrive in Ukraine. As is known, the system itself is mounted on a Leopard tank chassis, and the Skyranger 35 is being produced using Russian assets frozen in Europe. Isn't it wonderful that the number of so-called good Russians will increase thanks to the money of those very same Russians? Reading the comments under previous episodes, I see that many of our viewers are from Kazakhstan, Moldova, Europe, and even the USA. We Ukrainians are very grateful for your support and proud to have such reasonable viewers. Let us know in the comments under this episode as well which country you're watching us from and whether people there support our fight against the empire of evil. I always enjoy reading your comments. And for now, we continue. Next comes the most interesting part. China is abruptly halting imports of Russian oil, and this is a worrying sign for the Kremlin. According to Bloomberg, Chinese companies are significantly cutting back on purchases of Russian oil due to the risk of falling under secondary US sanctions. According to the publication, the decline could reach 2 to 3 times the previous volume. Meanwhile, at the White House, Donald Trump is ready to approve a prepared law imposing total sanctions on buyers of Russian oil. If the law comes into force, the blow to Putin will be devastating. And judging by today's reaction from Beijing, China already understands this very well. More details about this in our report.
America is preparing to deliver the most painful blow to the Kremlin. Donald Trump is making it clear, very clear, the era of flexible sanctions is over. If Russia does not stop the war, the world must cut off its oxygen.
Any country that does business with Russia will face very serious sanctions.
The US president is ready to sign a new package of sanctions against the Russian Federation. According to Reuters, the White House has already given the signal to Congress. The 47th president will approve the bill, but only on his own terms. If it includes a provision that gives him the personal exclusive right to make the final decision on whether or not to impose sanctions, this is exactly what becomes the main bargaining chip.
For the White House and the president, it has always been important that the sanctions package includes a provision guaranteeing the president the right to make the final decision on sanctions. Therefore, if this is included, I think the president will consider signing the bill, a White House source said.
The bill was authored by Republican Lindsey Graham and Democrat Richard Blumenthal. The document provides for 500% tariffs on imports from countries that purchase Russian oil, gas, and uranium. The goal is not just to hit the Kremlin, but also to cut off all partners of Moscow who continue to support the financing of the war.
At this point, Trump is determined to put additional pressure on the Russian Federation, particularly on its oil market, quite actively.
Trump's new sanctions could deal a devastating blow to the Kremlin's economy. The Russian oil market risks losing its key buyers. India, China, and Middle Eastern countries are under threat. Trump, on the other hand, proposes to expand the list of targets and add Iran to the sanctions list, a country that helps Moscow circumvent restrictions and strengthen oil schemes.
When we clearly understand that China buys 60% of Russian oil and the Americans are unlikely to escalate any forms of sanctions, especially after the meeting between Xi Jinping and Trump, essentially they have taken a 1-year timeout on imposing mutual sanctions. Most likely part of the Russian oil market in China will remain. At the same time, countries that were the second and third largest buyers of oil, namely India and Turkey, are now actively seeking alternative sources of supply. And
while across the ocean they are preparing to deliver a decisive blow, Raifi is dealing with the consequences of yet another sanctions package. At the end of October, the US introduced a new package of sanctions against the Russian oil sector. Rosneft, Lukoil, and 31 of their subsidiaries were subjected to restrictions.
They have already seriously shaken the Russian market. The price of Urals has dropped sharply. Really, it's a dramatic fall. And at the same time, yes, as of today, there is a very serious problem with foreign assets, particularly for Lukoil. But at the same time, we've already heard that the American company Chevron has received preliminary approval from the US Treasury Department to enter into negotiations with Lukoil about purchasing their foreign assets. The approximate value of this package is estimated at around $20 billion. Well, in any case, such developments are underway and we are watching closely. That is, we need to understand that the assets we're talking about are the very instruments through which the Russian Federation sells oil. If these instruments fall into other hands, Russia will have significantly less ability to maintain the current volume of oil sales.
If Trump does end up signing the bill and countries under US pressure reduce their purchases, the blow to Russia's budget revenues will be catastrophic. Even Russian propaganda will no longer be able to hide the real economic consequences. And the Kremlin will feel pressure it hasn't experienced throughout the entire full-scale war.
Until we see the final version of the bill, until it is at least approved by the majority of the American parliament, in this situation, it's nothing more than, let's say, threats.
Austria failed to remain neutral, as it has become known media report that sniper rifle scopes from Swarovski are being imported into Russia, despite EU sanctions. They are supplied by the premium optical device manufacturer Swarovski Optic, which is a division of the well-known jewelry company. According to customs data, since the start of the full-scale war, at least 90 such optical scopes have been imported into Russia, 57 of which arrived in 2023. The total value of the scopes is almost 21 million rubles, an amount that would be more than enough for some small Russian town or village in the hinterland to at least, in 2025, improve the lives of ordinary people. And now, the reality of the Russian world.
If anyone wants to go back to the past, to return to the USSR, then follow me. I'll show you a little summary. This is a miracle, the 7th wonder, yes, and this will be the 20th wonder. This is the Victoria store, still operating to this day. Can you imagine? This is Selfo, this is Selfo, let's go. Here's a functioning store. Look at how beautiful it is.
The trenches have disappeared, and in their place, a deadly grey zone 20 kilometers wide has formed. Drones rule there completely and absolutely. Military analysts are talking about a fundamental change in the rules of warfare. What are the risks for Ukrainian defenders, and why is it that the Ukrainian armed forces are winning this drone war? Let's watch the report.
A UAV operator from the 110th Separate Mechanized Brigade perfectly drops a grenade into a trench with Russian soldiers. One of them tries to throw the explosive out but doesn't make it in time. As a result of the successful drop, several occupiers were eliminated. This is exactly what modern warfare looks like now. In fact, there are practically no assaults or frontal attacks with vehicles. Drones have put an end to positional warfare. That was the headline of an article published in the American outlet Politico.
The fighting in Ukraine no longer resembles the trench warfare of World War I. Instead, drones have erased the continuous front line, creating a kill zone. As a result, a gray zone of chaos has formed, stretching about 20 kilometers from the front line, where drones hunt soldiers. The wounded are left to die because it is extremely difficult to evacuate them, and delivering ammunition, food, and water to the fighting troops is nearly impossible.
The sky above the gray zone is shrouded in smoke from drones. UAVs are equipped with thermal imagers, cameras, bombs, and cannons. And some lie for hours along the roads, waiting for military vehicles to pass by. At the same time, there is a hunt for UAV pilots, who are sitting tens of kilometers away.
We have moved on to a war of drones against drones. Now drones can set up ambushes, intercept enemy logistics systems, and disrupt supply lines. In addition, it has become harder to hold positions. If you are detected, all the weaponry in the area will immediately be directed at your destruction. Pavel Polisa, Colonel of the Ukrainian Armed Forces.
Russian military public pages are quoting this article, but as always, in their own way. Here's one example of Russian propaganda, where it says that Russian drones don't give the Ukrainian armed forces a moment's rest. Although in reality, it's exactly the opposite.
Because of Russian drones, Ukrainian soldiers are forced to stay at their positions for weeks. Drones make evacuation, rotation, and the delivery of ammunition and food extremely dangerous.
Information from open sources shows that it is actually the Russian army that abandons its wounded soldiers instead of evacuating them. Now, Russia is also trying to keep up in the production of various strike UAVs. For example, in frontline areas, the enemy has started using a new type of Iranian drone, the Shahed 101, a warhead weighing 8 to 9 kilograms and a flight range of several hundred kilometers. So far, the occupiers have not managed to localize the production of this drone in Russia. The UAVs were produced in 2024 in Iran. But it's only a matter of time. The Russians learn quickly from their mistakes.
We're going head to head, and they have some really impressive developments. Their science is well established and it works. They have managed to suppress and break the internal resistance, the pushback against the war. That's why they have these developments and the machine is working. They prepared for war, they improved the Shaheds and made Lancets based on Israeli drones.
Drones have become so effective that they've even pushed artillery back from the front line and have made it nearly impossible to use armored vehicles to supply the troops.
Drones have become useful for delivery and evacuation, combat reconnaissance, and remote mining, tasks that were previously usually carried out by people in war.
Despite the difference in resources, Ukraine currently has drone parity with Russia on the front lines, and in some areas even holds an advantage. But the development of this military component never stops, not even for a minute. I never
cease to admire the courage and heroism of Ukrainian soldiers. They hold the front and stand against a huge horde that vastly outnumbers them. That's why I urge you to support the armed forces of Ukraine, and if you can't do so financially, write them words of encouragement in the comments. I know they're watching us.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism, and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine today. Join us now.
Meanwhile, Dmitry Peskov stated that relations between Russia and Poland have completely deteriorated in light of the recent sabotage on the railway tracks in Poland. Let me remind you that all traces of this explosion lead to Moscow. That's why the Poles are closing the Russian consulate general in Poland. Peskov called this an irrational Maria Zakharova immediately chimed in, stating that in response, Moscow will reduce Poland's diplomatic and consular presence in Russia. You could say that the Russians are offended by Europe's reaction to their antics. Russia is already actively operating on the territory of the North Atlantic Alliance. A recent example of this is the same sabotage on the Polish railways. Warsaw was quick to announce preparations for war. The question is, will they have time to prepare?
There's no need to make things up and on this, to form an opinion about Russia based on these inventions. There's no need to create the image of Russia as the enemy. They made up this idea that Russia wants to attack NATO. Are you completely out of your mind? You're as dumb as this table. Who came up with this? This is nonsense, you understand? Utter rubbish.
The Kremlin has begun preparations for war against Poland.
We are now closer than ever to open conflict since World War II.
In this pre-war situation, the General Staff announced a planned attack.
The aggressor has begun preparations for war. He is creating an environment meant to undermine public trust in the government, the army, and the police in order to set the stage for potential aggression against Polish territory.
The Chief of the General Staff of Poland stated that recently there has been a significant increase in acts of sabotage in the country, as well as large-scale cyber attacks. These events may indicate that Russia is creating the conditions for destabilizing the situation and weakening the state from within. One of the most recent such incidents was an explosion on the Warsaw-Lublin railway line.
Analyzing all the incidents that have taken place in Poland and Europe, one can say that all the traces lead east to Moscow.
Polish authorities believe that this episode and other similar cases bear the hallmarks of pre-planned operations that may be linked to the activities of foreign
intelligence services on the Warsaw-Lublin route. This is an unprecedented act of sabotage, directly targeting the security of the Polish state and its civilian population. We will catch those responsible, whoever they may be.
2 months before this, about 20 Russian drones entered Polish territory en masse for the first time. Poland's security bloc stated that the threat from drones was more serious than the authorities had believed.
The claim that these were cardboard and paper objects is not entirely true.
The Polish leadership does not hide the fact that it is preparing for a direct confrontation. We
can respond to these threats either symmetrically or asymmetrically. We have the full arsenal of tools at our disposal.
Military analyst and former SBU officer Ivan Stupak is convinced that the Kremlin is already waging a hybrid war against Europe. And the only question is when it will escalate into an open conflict.
For Russia, what it is currently doing in Europe is already a war. Asymmetric, non-linear, hybrid. Call it whatever you want, but it is ongoing.
Poland's strategic position between the Kaliningrad region and Belarus makes it one of the key countries for the security of all of NATO. And Warsaw itself plays an important role in ensuring the defense of the eastern flank. Consequently, the defense of Estonia, Latvia and Lithuania will directly depend on the ability of Polish forces to respond to potential threats in a timely manner.
Everything depends on our stance. Will we be able to deter the enemy, or will we encourage them to act aggressively?
While most European countries spent many years discussing the potential threat from Russia, Poland was engaged in systematic and targeted preparations. Over the past decades, Warsaw has significantly strengthened its military capabilities, and the buildup of defense capabilities began immediately after Russia's annexation of Crimea.
While other countries waited to see who would make the first move, Poland took action. In
2024, Poland's defense budget rose to 4.7% of its GDP. This is the highest figure among all NATO member states. Modernization of military equipment and an increase in troop numbers to more than 200,000 soldiers. This makes the Polish army one of the largest in Europe. In addition, Poland has become one of the largest purchasers of weapons from the United States. The country has invested about $50 billion.
Without the United States, there is no alliance. We need to spend more on defense, not to replace the Americans in Europe, but to keep them here.
The Polish people are tired of the war going on in the neighboring country. That is why there is a worsening attitude toward Ukrainians among them. The Polish Minister of Defense stated that people do not see the main enemy, and those who speak out against Ukraine are acting against Poland.
This should be valued and respected, not used to incite hostility against Ukrainians in Poland or to fuel anti-German sentiment.
The Chief of the General Staff of Poland called for the creation of a Cold War 2.0, large-scale investment in defense, and making it clear to Moscow that any attack on NATO would receive a decisive response. Now, the future of European countries depends on NATO's readiness to defend itself. Russia continues to attack Ukraine, but they are not targeting military facilities. Instead, they are striking civilian targets, specifically residential buildings. The night of November 19th was no exception. Russia carried out a massive shelling.
No. No, I really mean it. No.
This is exactly how 9 Russian missiles struck Ternopil, specifically hitting a residential building. People did not have time to escape. There are already more than 20 dead, including 2 children. More than 60 people have been injured. The clearing of the rubble from the residential buildings is still ongoing. And all of this is because Putin simply hates Ukrainians. Notably, after the attack in Ternopil, the chlorine level in the air is 6 times higher than normal. Local residents have been urged not to leave their homes and to keep their windows tightly closed. There was also a strike on Kharkiv, where more than 40 city residents were injured. Not only civilian infrastructure has been damaged, but also energy and transportation facilities. Ivano-Frankivsk, as well as the Lviv, Donetsk, Kyiv, Mykolaiv, Cherkasy, Chernihiv, and Dnipropetrovsk regions were also under attack. Putin is deliberately targeting civilians and demanding as many casualties as possible. Overnight, Russia launched more than 470 drones and 48 missiles at Ukraine. The US and Russia are secretly developing a plan to end the war in Ukraine. This plan consists of 28 points. This was reported by Axios, citing its own sources. According to sources, the 28 points of this plan are divided into 4 general categories: peace in Ukraine, security guarantees, European security, and the future of US relations with Russia and Ukraine. Meanwhile, Kremlin envoy Dmitriev expressed optimism about the chances of the agreement's success and said that Moscow feels the Russian position is being heard. What exactly they are hearing is unknown, but one more fact is known. According to political journalists, an agreement to end the war could be reached by the end of the month or possibly even this week. According to sources, this is what the White House is counting on. Also, according to journalists, a U.S. delegation from the Pentagon, led by J. Vance's classmate Dan Driscoll, has already arrived in Kyiv to discuss peace talks with Russia. The main goal is to revive the stalled peace process. Since Trump has made it clear that it is time to stop the killing and reach an agreement to end the war. Later, President Zelensky himself stated that today he will meet with high-ranking officials from the Pentagon in Kyiv. Meanwhile, the Wall Street Journal reports that after negotiations with Zelensky in Kyiv, Driscoll will head to Russia. Could they really reach a peace agreement? What do you think? Write your opinion in the comments. It will be interesting to read. Since peace has not yet been reached, we need to make money quickly. This is exactly what the head of the Russian General Staff, Valery Gerasimov, is doing in Moscow. But he's not just busy stealing from the Russian budget, he also spoils his mistress. It's well known that the 70-year-old Gerasimov has a wife who is the same age as he is. But, as has recently become known, he also has a mistress, Elena Selefanova, who even gave birth to his illegitimate daughter in 2014. Gerasimov didn't acknowledge her for 5 years, but then, as they say, his heart skipped a beat. After his mistress's maternity leave, Gerasimov decided to get her a job at the Russian Ministry of Defense, even though she has no military education. Naturally, the mistress receives a good salary. Moreover, Gerasimov also bought her luxury real estate. At the very least, it is known that she owns 4 apartments, one of which is in a historic building on the embankment not far from the Kremlin. It's not exactly clear what Gerasimov's mistress is doing now, but it is known that she doesn't deny herself a good vacation. She has been to NATO member Turkey at least 7 times since the start of the full-scale war in Ukraine. That's what happens when you're a close associate of Putin and a fan of waging war in a neighboring country. Instead of killing people in a neighboring country, they'd be better off thinking about their own. In Russia, medical university students are dropping out en masse and changing their field of study. And it's all because of the law on mandatory service. According to the new laws of the Russian Federation, state-funded medical students are now required to sign a contract for targeted training in residency before passing their final certification. To put it simply, after graduation, they have to work for several years in state hospitals before they can choose where they want to work. Students do not support these rules.
Most people who studied on a state-funded basis did so not out of principle, but because paying tuition was simply not an option for them. They will remain in poverty for many more years. I have the most traditional values. At school, I studied while traveling to Orléans, Sirius, and ATACMS. I was on live broadcasts with the president 3 times, sitting in the front row thanks to my achievements. I literally fought tooth and nail for my place at a federal medical center to become a doctor to help people. In my 3rd year, I got married, classic military-based story. Honestly, I really wanted a big family. I was sure that by the end of university, I would have it. But not only am I the one providing for the family, yes, a student, not an almost captain. Now, on top of that, they're offering us even more. 5 more years of being broke, considering inflation, considering that it's already impossible to buy an apartment or a house right now. So that's another 5 years without kids. I'll be 30. I don't know how all those girls pregnant at 16 manage, but I just can't afford such a luxury. And yet they keep shouting, oh, have children! But 90% of medical students are women. In the Soviet Union, at least there was some support for young doctors. But you know, you might say, what about you? You're a blogger. Do you even know how much our income dropped because of the new April taxes? Since September, now you have to work it off for the budget. And doctors swore an oath to the hippopotamus. Basically, everyone owes something to someone. Never mind that in this country, both engineers and lawyers have the right to free education. That we enrolled under different conditions, I wouldn't have enrolled otherwise. That we don't swear an oath to the hippopotamus. Well, anyway.
The girl laid out all the facts. Taxes are rising, inflation is rising, housing prices are rising, and doctors' salaries are peanuts. The Russian authorities and the war have destroyed any chance of starting a family and living comfortably, yet they still demand that people have children. Bravo!